welcome to the New York City Employment and Training Coalition Virtual Conference Series. My name is Annie Garniva, and I'm the Vice President for Policy and Special Initiatives at the New York City Employment Training Coalition. Today, in this final installment in our four-part virtual conference series, we'll discuss the role of job training providers in workforce development and our economic recovery. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of sitting down with three experts with diverse perspectives: Christopher Bloodworth, Christopher Collins, and Michelle Rojas. Thank you to the members, partners, and friends that have joined us this afternoon. And a special thank you to JPMorgan Chase, Verizon, Google, and all of our sponsors for supporting the Coalition Conference Series. As many of you know, NYCETC supports the workforce development community to ensure that every New Yorker has access to the skills, training, and education needed to thrive in the local economy, and that every business is able to maintain a highly skilled workforce. Coalition membership is composed of 180 workforce providers, education institutions, and labor management organizations that provide job training and employment services to nearly 600,000 New Yorkers. Before we get started, all participants should know that you will be muted for the duration of this webinar. I'll moderate a discussion with our speakers and discuss the role that job training providers play within our economic recovery and should continue to play. And afterwards, we'll have a Q&A portion where you can interact with the panelists. So now I will introduce our speakers, who are incredible individuals leading excellent and innovative work in our community. Our first guest, Christopher Bloodworth, is the National Director of the Career Center at the Actors Fund, as well as a board member of the Coalition. Welcome, Christopher. Next up, we have Chris Collins, who is the Executive Director of Solar One. And last but not least, we have Michelle Rojas, who is the Workforce Program Director at Hot Bread Kitchen. And I will also emphasize that all these organizations are Coalition members. So before we get started, please take a minute to introduce yourselves, your organization, and the role that you play in the workforce development community. And before you introduce yourselves, I just want to take a minute to really talk about the work that our field does, and so that I can contextualize your work within them. So as you all know, the workforce development system is incredibly complex and varied, reflecting the complexity of our local economy, the needs of businesses, and a wide variety of sectors, as well as the diversity and needs of New Yorkers. At all times, workforce service providers are adapting to changing labor market conditions and demands, nurturing relationships with employers and their community, and supporting the holistic needs of their students and clients, many of whom have multiple barriers to employment, in order to successfully connect New Yorkers to strong careers and help businesses thrive with local talent. Critical to this are robust education and training programs that help New Yorkers gain skills and credentials to enter the workforce and grow within a career. The three speakers we have with us today represent three very different sectors and approaches to education and training, intentionally designed to best serve the skills demands of their sectors and communities they serve. So why don't we first get started with Christopher, if you could introduce yourself, your organization, and the role that you play within our community.
Great, thank you, Annie, for welcoming me here today, and hello, everyone out in webinar land. My name is Christopher Bloodworth. As Annie mentioned, I'm the National Director for the Career Center at the Actors Fund. We are a nonprofit organization that supports the needs of performing arts and entertainment professionals, helping to provide them with security as they move through a quite episodic career. My job is to ensure that all of the policies that are necessary to ensure people gain access to work throughout the Actors Fund is implemented. I have teams in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. And yeah, that's what we do, and that's how I serve in that capacity.
Excellent. And Chris, what about you?
Yeah, hi, welcome everybody. My name is Chris Collins. I'm the Executive Director at Solar One. Solar One started about 18 years ago with a focus on education. And workforce training, and now more recently solar development in New York City and affordable housing. Our workforce training program is focused not only on renewable energy, but also energy efficiency, green building operations and maintenance, green construction, electrical and plumbing, and that kind of stuff. We're focused a lot on the building sector and in the energy space. We do most of our work with workforce agencies, so we don't necessarily have just sort of courses that we offer to the public. Rather, we do them through partnerships with various workforce agencies, many of whom are members of the coalition.
Excellent. And Michelle?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Annie, for having us here today. My name is Michelle Rojas. Today, I might just go by Christopher number 3. Just kidding. I am the Director of Workforce Programs at Hopwood Kitchen, as well as our founding chair of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Allyship work, and a licensed master social worker. Hopwood Kitchen is a nonprofit social enterprise, and we aim to create economic mobility for individuals impacted by gender, racial, social, and/or economic inequality here in New York City, historically using the food industry as a pathway forward. We do this through 2 main programs. One is our Investing in Breadwinners, where we provide immediate stability and customized career pathways for women. And the second is our small business programming, where we support entrepreneurs of color. As director, I oversee our case management and social work team, our financial coaching programming, as well as our workforce program development and design.
Great. So clearly, 3 very different organizations that reflect really just the type of variety that needs to exist within a robust workforce sector. So with that in mind, I'd like to kick off this conversation by asking each of you to discuss what you see as key elements of successful training programs and how those have changed during the pandemic, as well as kind of in the near future. So Michelle or Christopher number 3, if you want to get started today first.
Yeah, definitely. So the elements that Hopwood Kitchen is prioritizing currently, given the pandemic and the needs of our members, are case management, or coaching as we call it, financial coaching services, professional readiness, peer-to-peer support, and job training. Prior to the pandemic, we were training women for jobs in the culinary industry. They would complete a 4 to 5 week program, and then we would place them in jobs throughout New York City at our employment partnerships. Post-pandemic, we had to quickly pivot to a crisis management or emergency response model, putting an emphasis again on this case management and financial coaching supports. We were facing a 40% unemployment rate. We've been placing women in jobs for the last 12 years, and a good chunk of them were now finding themselves displaced due to how hard hit the culinary industry was by the pandemic. So we really needed to pivot quickly and find creative and impactful ways to meet the biopsychosocial needs of our constituency. We were very, very fortunate to have raised funds from individual donors that allowed us to distribute close to $300,000 in no strings attached payments to our members. And this is something that's core to what we do. Supporting our members holistically is core to their success, both in their personal and professional lives. And we know that in the culinary industry, people aren't leaving jobs because of the jobs themselves. They're leaving because they don't have childcare, they're unable to pay their rent, and are going through difficult circumstances. And we as an organization are positioning ourselves to be able to support them as best as possible.
Great. And Christopher, what about you? What do you find to be key elements of training programs from your view at the Actors Fund?
Thank you. One of the things that we do and find key is really individualizing the services that we provide to clients. Because many of our folks are professional performers, actors, dancers, musicians, etc. They have already been well trained in their respective industry and or discipline. And they are dealing with the challenge of having an open market sector, which is the artistic market. And as a result of that, many of our folks are looking to figure out how they can transfer the skills that they've learned or have acquired in the position that they currently hold into new positions. So we are looking at transferable skills and individual approach to career management and development. So that is really key. That's what we focus on and what we've been focusing on since the pandemic. Pretty much since the pandemic happened, or before the pandemic, but now since the pandemic happened, we've been working on access. And the reason why we've been working on access is because the arts and entertainment sector has been devastated by the pandemic. Approximately 60% of all performing arts and entertainment professionals are unemployed at this moment. And then when you add race into this factor, you're talking nearly 70% of individuals are unemployed. And this has been double hit because many of our people find themselves in other sectors like the culinary sector or hospitality and retail, et cetera. And with those being closed, you have a double whammy of people being outside of work. And so now they're having to look at other ways in which they can transfer the skills that they have into other endeavors. And so we've done a number of things to try to support them in this effort, including similar to what Michelle mentioned. Over the course of the pandemic, we've given out $19 million to our participants to help them during this time to navigate all of the challenges that they are dealing with. So, but money is a small thing that we have to give them. What we really need to provide is additional resources and access to employers who understand the needs of people who are episodic, who are looking for more diversity in their career journey and not necessarily the stability that comes along with traditional work.
Great. And Chris, what about you? What are your perspective on successful job training elements from?
Yeah, we have a kind of unique model here. We work with a lot of the major workforce agencies, so our population tends to be people who are coming out of the criminal justice system, people who are formerly homeless, former substance users, and they will go to those service agencies and they may be there for a period of 2 or 3 months, and they will come to us for anywhere from a week to 5 weeks of skills training. And that tends to be hard skill training. So we do a lot of hands-on activity, and in the mornings we do classroom activities. In the afternoons we may have the teams build out an electrical circuit or a solar array or a drywall or whatever. And so moving into the pandemic was a little bit of a challenge because we couldn't really do that part of it. I mean, there were all the technical challenges of making sure everybody has laptops and things like that. But the hard part for us was being able to deliver that sort of hands-on activity part. And we were during the summer able to do some of that stuff outdoors. So we did work with a few of our partners outside, and we are actually planning to do that kind of hybrid model as well this spring, summer, and fall. So those were some of the challenges. We're in an industry that's expanding and growing and has funding and has mandates. So climate change and carbon emissions reductions goals are all mandated by the city and state. And so we're in a kind of a weird situation because our population can get jobs, but we're always on the lookout for what they are. And that's one of the things that we're going to be looking out for over the course of the next couple of years, particularly as the federal administration, the Biden administration, as well as the state and the city roll out all these various programs and workforce training programs and incentive programs.
Great. Thank you all. So pre-pandemic job training programs were struggling to meet the full demands of individuals looking for economic mobility and upskilling, And of course, you've all alluded to this, but this demand has dramatically increased during the pandemic, especially in historically marginalized communities. And you've already touched upon this in how you've kind of pivoted during the pandemic. So I was wondering if each of you could talk about kind of a larger lesson learned that through this process that you would recommend that job training providers implement as they transition into recovery and really tackling how to support especially historically marginalized community, as well as really the sectors that you each support from the business side. So this could be, discussions around labor market data and how you've implemented that, to specifics around new elements of programming. So why don't we kick it off with Christopher this time?
Thanks, Annie. Continuing from where I left off in your previous question, work is incredibly personal. And I think that one of the things that we look at the Actors Fund and we are striving to achieve with our clients is to recognize the individuality associated with work and how people come to understand who they are and how they translate who they are into work and income, right? And so part of what I recognize when we're talking about disparities that's hitting marginalized communities in our society is that we need to begin to understand how we can create workforce development programs and systems that help to support the individual needs of people. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, creating access to choice. And that's one of the things that we do with our clients, right? We want to know, we have a number of programs that we can put people through, but we really want to know who are you and what do you want to do with your work and with your life, right? Because then that's how you get people to move along a continuum that takes them out of poverty and into a space of stability, right? And sustainability. And so access to choice is one of the things that I was thinking about. And then supporting their educational needs. That's one of the things that we do. We offer scholarships to individuals who are looking to be retrained in other areas, because it's not just about pointing a direction. Sometimes people need additional training in order to move them into spaces that allow them to earn more money and to be more secure in their career. As well as identifying and removing any and all of the structural barriers that prevent people from moving into those spaces. And those are things that we're continuing to explore at the Actors Fund, and really challenging a number of our partners to help them think like we're thinking when we're talking about this type of work. So moving away from a standard of quantity, how many people have you moved through a particular system, to quality, right? How well are people functioning within the programs and the services that you've developed? And then what are their outcomes, not necessarily in how much are they making, but how skilled are they in making decisions on their own post your intervention? So those are the things that we're thinking about, the things that we're concerned about, and the things that we believe that individuals need to, not individuals, the system, workforce development system need to implement as they're moving this forward past the pandemic, because the world of work has changed and it will continue to change. We know it and we need to adapt to it. So those are my thoughts.
Couldn't agree more. Michelle, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you, Christopher. That's a beautiful answer. Similarly, at Hopper Kitchen, we're going towards that same direction, thinking about quality over quantity, individualizing our approaches. I think for a long time, workforce development has been a one-size-fits-all approach, when not everyone can adapt to that, or that's not what they may need. So at Hopper Kitchen, we like to joke that there's an unfunded mandate to bridge people that have significant barriers, but may not necessarily have a GED or high school diploma or other prerequisites for entering workforce programs. We are putting an emphasis on providing those things in-house. So providing ESL, providing GED to those who may need it, instead of just saying, hey, you don't have these things, unfortunately, you can't do our program right now. Saying, you can't do this program right now. However, we want to enroll you in these other opportunities so that you can take advantage of the other programs that we have to offer. So yeah, I think it's really about meeting your members where they're at and ensuring that you have the programs and the resources to support them in filling the gaps in their learning. Yeah, so I think there's not much to add to your answer there, Christopher.
And Chris, what about you? Any lessons learned that you want to highlight for our audience?
Yeah, I think by the time students come to us, they've already sort of self-selected into wanting to do something in the green space. And so for us, what we try to do, and we don't do the placement part, our partners do that, but we provide a lot of assistance with it because we have that sort of knowledge of the industry and the partners. And so what we're doing more and more now is really sort of offering trainings where we know there are jobs on the back end. So we have partnerships that we've established, and we'll go get funding from, for example, NYCERT or some other agency committed to making sure that there's jobs on the back end and those folks that we've trained can get them. And I think that's a little different from the way it's been done in the past, because I think there's been kind of this, let's get people trained. And we're also doing a lot of transferable skill training. So a solar installation training teaches you about solar installation, but also teaches you electrical and construction, a bunch of other things. So there's if a person doesn't get a solar installation job, they might get a job doing construction somewhere or doing some electrical apprentice work. So that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to do and do more of it. And I will say, I think having the city and state mandates is making that a lot easier for us.
And just to flag all of these kind of lessons learned, and you'll definitely have an opportunity to have these discussions further in the breakout sessions for our audience members. So you've alluded to some of this and the fact that the pandemic has really exacerbated a fuller scope of needs that New Yorkers have, from food and housing insecurity to mental health issues that directly impact individuals' access to employment. In the past, it's been treated perhaps as a nice to have, and the pandemic has really highlighted it, that these are elements that are must have that are connected to training programs. So my question here is, how do you see supportive services playing a role in your workforce programming, and how you've incorporated that into your programming, including kind of accessing funding and resources for those types of services? So I'll open this up to whoever wants to answer it. We don't necessarily need to have everybody answer each question.
We've been fortunate to actually have social workers on staff that can provide one-on-one wraparound services. And we started this work around 3 years ago now. So all of our graduates have access to a social worker, and they call us. We have graduates who finished a program 5 years ago, and they'll call us up and say, hey, can you help me with my rent, or I'm behind on rent? Can you help me with find childcare? I recognize that not all workforce development organizations can afford to bring on full-time social workers. However, there's definitely a benefit to collaboration. If you can find a human service organization that may have pilots or satellite sites throughout New York City, tapping into that, being able to provide warm handoff referrals is crucial. It's New York City. Oftentimes that hotline number, you leave a message, you'll never hear back. We have really been able to nurture and grow our wraparound supports in that way by really honing and building our partnerships throughout New York City, because we train women from New York, all around the city, as well as New Jersey. So we need to have those partnerships and that network to be able to kind of refer our members to where they need to go. I will also say that it's crucial. I don't think we're at a point, and we haven't been at this point, if you're not providing some type of social service, whether it's a referral somewhere or a connection somewhere, I would argue that you're probably doing a disservice to the people that you're serving, right? It's beyond just providing someone with the job training. We also understand how vital having a stable household, having childcare, having this kind of village of people to bring you up is to your career longevity. So I would encourage other workforce providers to look into this, because it is now more than ever so vital to the well-being of our members.
I could not have said that better, Michelle, and I agree wholeheartedly. It is crucial that we begin to think about wraparound services, thinking about all of the soft services that individuals need in order to create for themselves the opportunities that the organization is attempting to encourage, right? And so this idea of, for me, I look at it, the difference between motivation and inspiration, right? So the motivation is to get them there. The inspiration is what you allow people to gather or learn or grow once they find themselves in a space where they're seen, heard, and respected, right? And the only way that we do that is by addressing a lot of the barriers that they're bringing in, right? The limiting beliefs, the negative self-talk, all of the other things that kind of cloud their minds and create for them this system that makes them feel as if they'll never move beyond where they are, right? And so having social workers, having licensed mental health counselors, having people on staff that can really help to mitigate those challenges helps to not only move the client forward, but move the effectiveness of the intervention forward holistically. And so for me, and maybe I'm biased because I am a social worker, but I also know that the work that we do with our clients is all based on helping them heal from things that are invisible, that then helps them to move into spaces where they can become more active participants in their lives. And so without it, I don't know what we would do at the Actors Fund. So we rely on those wraparound services to really mitigate all of the challenges that keeps people in poverty.
Great. So we'll transition to kind of focusing a little bit on your sectoral work and how that has informed your particular training models. So you could speak a little bit on how you've integrated your particular sectors, how you've been working, especially with how they've been impacted in the pandemic, and what other sectors you foresee in job training demand increasing over the next year or two, and how you're integrating that shift into your practices. So Chris, why don't we start with you first?
Sure. I guess the first thing I'd say is, there's this sort of elusive green job concept. And what we like to focus on is not necessarily the green job, but rather the sort of industry as a whole that focuses on energy and on the building sector. Those are the two main areas that we train for. So the jobs in that case and what we see happening are various city mandates are forecasting, for example, 150,000 employees in the next decade just to do energy efficiency kind of work in the city to meet Local 197, the Climate Mobilization Act, meet those mandates on energy emissions reductions. So there will be jobs. They're not necessarily going to be, quote, green jobs. There'll be jobs that'll be focused on making buildings more efficient. Sure, that's a quote green job. But and there'll be solar jobs, and that's a green job. But there's also jobs or occupations that are related to that you wouldn't think of as being a green job, like the accounting back office room at Con Ed that has to all of a sudden deal with how they're going to process payments back to people on the system, people on the grid who are now selling energy back to the grid. So those are green jobs too, although you don't think of an accountant or you don't think of a bookkeeper as being a green job. So you have to sort of think broadly about this stuff. And at the same time, we focus really on those details. What is the utility looking for? What are they going to be doing with smart meters? How are they going to get those installed? Who's going to do those installations? That kind of stuff. And we really drill down into the details to try and find out what in this sector overall, what jobs are there, what jobs are being funded. Certainly NYCERTA has lots and lots of incentive programs that are funding building owners to do certain work. And those are where we drill into those and try and find partners that are doing that. Air source heat pumps installation, big focus of NYCERTA's. So that's the way we look at it. We try and follow the roadmap on energy and buildings, and then move forward on that. And you're going to see wind as another area. We don't focus on wind, but that's another big area that's going to be growing over the course of the next few years. Not immediately, but certainly over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's how we're approaching. That's what I think is how we're approaching the sector.
Great. So a really detective approach through the labor market stuff.
Absolutely.
And this is my little climate perpetual call out. Some music to my ears to really hear that marrying of two really critical elements, I think, of our modern life, the climate crisis and the economic crisis. And very much from an advocacy perspective on our end, I think it's really important for the coalition now members to start thinking about the way that you described it. Actually, the way you described climate is the way that I've heard tech described in the past, that there's a lot of providers have thought about tech in this very specific, limited way. And once you broaden the scope to think that there's actually tech jobs and tech roles in every sector, I appreciate the framing as well as green. We can think of green elements as transferable skills to a lot of places. So I'm definitely excited to learn more about that as we go forward. And Christopher, what about you? What and the specific sectors that you support?
Yeah, well, within the arts and entertainment sector, most people are, again, committed to the work that they've trained in and are doing. So if I'm a director, I want to make sure that I'm getting opportunities to direct. If I'm a producer, et cetera, if I'm a lighting designer, et cetera. So what we tend to do is not necessarily look within the sector for people to help them find work, but look outward. So we're constantly looking at what's happening in the world that's growing. And so obviously healthcare is a sector where we're looking at supporting or getting more artistic people into that sector, doing a various array of work, and opportunities are there for that opportunity, as well as probably the largest one we're looking at is entrepreneurship. And the reason why we're looking at entrepreneurship and looking at arts entrepreneurship in particular is really helping people begin to understand how to translate their talent, skills into opportunities that the public wishes or wants, right? So that's what we are really gearing. We have one of our programs is the Creative Entrepreneur Project, which really focuses in on helping creative people begin to understand how to leverage their talents and skills into an entrepreneurship opportunity. And we're seeing an increase in that. And it's connected loosely to the gig economy and what's happening there in terms of people picking up their own work, but not necessarily tied to the traditional gig world that we know now, like Uber and Airbnb, et cetera. Although we are partnering, for example, with Airbnb for experiences, both online and virtual experiences, as well as online experiences, as well as in-person experiences, as an opportunity to help our people begin to explore the ways in which they can market their own talents and sell their skills to individuals. So entrepreneurship is probably the largest market that we're looking at right now. And as most of you, I'm sure know, it's been a really uptick in entrepreneurship since the pandemic began, because people are pivoting to working for themselves. Of course, there are some dangers associated with that, everything with healthcare, et cetera, which we have to begin to talk about as a whole separate conversation. But yeah, that's the space that we're beginning to look at.
And Michelle, I know that you have some elements there that are connected to that, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. So we are also looking outwardly, but also inwardly at the same time. We're asking our members to do so. We really want to honor their voice and choice, and find opportunities that align with their longer term goals. Often culinary is the first step on the career journey of our members. So understanding that we want them to upskill and find opportunities for higher earning potential while harnessing their transferable skills. So one sector that we are actively and currently looking in is facilities management. And this was really a direct response to the workforce crisis that's happening in that sector. It is predominantly males that work in facilities management, and they are aging out. So there's a need to diversify that space and also to reinvigorate that workforce. And it's not a well-recognized field and does have high earning potential. And a lot of our current employment partners on the culinary side are also interested in potentially hiring our graduates on the facility management side. So it's kind of like a natural next step for us. Also, I want to highlight that the culinary industry and our approach to training has changed over the years. We recognize that it's not, our employment partners don't just care, can someone cook? They want to understand if someone is coachable, reliable, and more about that professional readiness or soft skill piece. Cooking can be trained, and we also emphasize on the job training. So understanding that we are doing the first step, but it's up to our employment partners to continue to guide and educate our graduates. So mostly our role is providing those professional readiness and really working with our employers to match people well, and again, encouraging them to take on that on-the-job training. So ultimately, the sector does have a very, very strong responsibility to the workforce to provide job training as well as opportunities for development, because the culinary industry has significantly high turnover. And unless those options are provided, it will continue to have high turnover.
Great. So one last question before we move on to a Q&A from our audience. As we transition into a new administration, as well as pretty big changes that will come on the city council level, where can advocacy play a role in serving your clients and your business sector partners, as well as the broader kind of needs that you see for recovery for the New Yorkers that you serve? So Christopher, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've been working on and really trying to get the varied administrations to understand are the unique needs of arts workers. And I don't think people understand the need. I don't think people understand arts workers. I think most people believe arts workers are doing fun things, and that their work isn't important, and that it doesn't require a bunch of skills, and that if they're not working necessarily within their particular field or sector, that they should just get a job elsewhere, which totally undermines the challenges of arts workers or the training that they've pursued to move into those fields. So one of those things we're trying to get people to do is understand the challenges of episodic work. And there was a really big win during the pandemic when individuals who typically will find themselves on a 1099 form were all of a sudden now eligible for unemployment, right? That's a huge boost for people to understand the varied ways in which people earn money. And so for me, continuation of things like that, ensuring that you understand the needs of people who aren't working in traditional work, a traditional 9 to 5 or other shift type work, right? So that's one of the things. And also the misconception of wealth and also privilege. And the reason why I say that is that, arts workers tend to be incredibly educated folks. About 70% of the people that I work with have a bachelor's degree or higher. And so as a result of that, but they are still in poverty because people think that because I'm on Broadway or because I'm playing X in X production that I'm making a lot of money, and that's not necessarily true. And so for me, it's really about where we're targeting our efforts is to try to get people to understand the unique needs of arts workers, and we're really advocating on more access to government support for people who do not have traditional work lives.
Michelle or Chris, do you have anything to add on the advocacy front?
I just quickly add that, when you look at these job training programs and you look at a lot of our trainees are entry level, and they're going into these jobs the first time. And to say nothing of a lot of the career and technical education high school students that we work with who are going to face a double dilemma of not even having had a job before. And what we've found is really helpful are wage subsidies for the first 4 or 5, 6 months. So advocating for those kinds of things in terms of funding for employers to be able to hire some of these people, give them a leg up and get them in the door, that's going to be really important. And that's probably true for some of the other industries as well.
Yeah, we found wage subsidies to be a central pillar of the work that we've been doing. So good to hear that it's been doing a tangible outcome on your end. Michelle, did you want to add anything about advocacy?
Yeah, building off of both Chris's, I think it comes down to eliminating scrutiny and also increasing funding. By decreasing and eliminating scrutiny, I mean that the food service industry has not historically been well recognized or well funded by the city. It's also been a sector that's just been blatantly ignored for a very long time, although it is one of the largest employers of people of color in this city. So this is also a place, New York City is a thriving cultural hub for food, right? It's central to a big reason why people choose to come here. It's central to tourism. And it's an industry that's very much hurting right now. So limiting the scrutiny of what it means to work in this industry, understanding the value of this industry is crucial. And then lastly, funding. So funding not only the micro needs of our constituencies and of food workers, understanding that many of them are facing very, very high rental arrears. There's a significant need to expand the eviction moratorium, but even eliminating rental arrears altogether because they are oftentimes insurmountable. Expanding DOL benefits, and again, funding this unfunded mandate to provide people with bridge training so that they can enroll and thrive in these workforce programs.
Yes, access is the most critical. We believe if you don't provide access to the people with the biggest barriers, then you're really doing a disservice to the whole system. So great to hear that from your perspective. So we're now going to open it up for a few questions from today's guests. We'll be listing participant names in the chat in order that you'll be called up to ask a question. And first up, we have Charisse Davis, who is a business relations representative at Access VR. Charisse? Charisse, you there?
I had to unmute myself. Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. This message is primarily directed to Chris Collins of Solar One. For years now, there has been a promise of an influx of green jobs in New York City that has never really come to fruition. I know because of the Biden administration, there will be a new focus on environmental policy which I'm assuming will create more jobs in that sector, green jobs. But when do you think the green jobs will become more available in New York City? When will the reality match the promises?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about the getting away from the sort of descriptor of green jobs. I think we really ought to be thinking in terms of what are the jobs that we need to do to reduce climate emissions, carbon emissions, and in New York City. And like I said, I think those are going to be mostly around the building sector. So you're going to see a lot of energy efficiency work. You're going to see a lot of weatherization activity happening. I think what happened in the 2012 first go round with green collar job money was that there was a lot of funding, but I think it didn't translate into a whole lot of new jobs because it really reinforced jobs that people already had, and in particular in the weatherization space. But I think you're going to see more and more of that kind of energy related jobs. We have a solar development program of our own that we have created, where we do a lot of solar development on affordable housing in the city, and we bundle buildings together. And because the projects get bigger, we're able to require installers to hire people coming out of our training program. So last year we hired about 30 people, got placed. So I don't know exactly when it's going to all sort of burst open, but I think as the economy starts to come back, there will be more and more funding for it, and there'll be more and more, and the mandates are kicking in. So building owners have to do this work, or they pay pretty stiff penalties. So I think we're going to start seeing that, but I wouldn't look for the sort of green job. I'd look for the jobs in the sectors like building, energy efficiency, renewable energies. Wind is going to be a big one. Uprose has worked with the state on creating this enormous platform out in Sunset Park, where they're going to be doing a fair amount of wind turbine, not construction, but ongoing maintenance and stuff. But those are going to take a while to get there because the offshore wind stuff has to get built first. So it's just I think it's going to be evolving. It's not going to be a big magic bullet that's going to be here overnight. And I think paying attention to where the funding is coming from and what it's supposed to be used for will help drive it. It helps drive what we train for and what we ask what our partners want us to train for. I hope that answers your question.
Great. And I think there's also an element of if you build it, they will come. So we've been trying to support our training providers and really thinking that, talent is a central pillar of how a job in a sector flourishes. And for too long, we've focused on attracting new businesses versus really helping businesses grow here through the lens of talent development. So multi-pronged approaches there. Next up, we have Mike Conway, who's the Executive Director of Stacks and Jewels. Mike?
Hey, thank you. And thank you all for all the work you're doing in these areas. So my question is related to topics that have come up many times across this discussion. And it's around that, I guess I would call it tension between supporting choice, individual choice, and then targeted high value technical skills for, like this discussion around emerging jobs, right? And that there's not always a direct connection there. And especially Christopher, I appreciate you talking about how often it's the impacts of oppressive systems that leave many thinking that they wouldn't be able to access certain skills or certain job types. So, the question in there is around like, how can we, or do you have any insight on approaching that tension between honoring the choice of individuals and targeted high value technical skills? Thank you.
I think 2020 has taught us all a lot of lessons about where we need to place our focus. And Michelle highlighted a lot of these in her conversation today, especially around rent instability and food instability and all of these things that are causing people to fall as soon as the rug is moved, not even pulled from under them, but just moved. And what we need to think about, and that's why I believe in this thing of choice, because work is personal. I'm almost sure everyone on this panel and everyone who's listening to me right now really took some time to think about what you wanted to do and how you wanted to connect your purpose, your personhood to work. And what we sometimes do, and what funders sometimes do, because again, return on investment is important. I will never undermine that theory. But the idea that we create cookie cutter programs that we usher everyone through and expect individuals to go through to start at the entry level and then move up, right? That works for people who are interested in that particular thing. And if we're talking about youth, I used to work with youth, if we're talking about youth, someone who's 16, 18, 19, they're not yet sure what it is, right? And unless we're doing some form of assessment to help people understand what their goals are, what their life story is telling them or beginning to tell them, then we're not going to get into that space. We keep talking about in the workforce development field, those middle skill jobs that sit empty for so long. And my belief is because we're not trying to figure out who are the people who would love those middle skill jobs and how can we help get them there. So there is a lot of tension. I think the thing is really having conversations with the funders around what you are learning, what people are asking for, and really, again, moving into the space where we're beginning to encourage the individual nature of work and stop clumping people together in these programs. It works for a moment, and that's it. It works for a moment and that's it. We want to move people into things that have a more lasting impact.
Just to quickly add on that, that's absolutely accurate. And I think the tension is absolutely there, but the solution is a lot simpler than people think. It's a question, right? Asking your population that you're serving, what is it that you're interested in? What are your long-term goals? And then understanding, hey, if you want to become a nurse, we may not have a nursing program in-house, but these are the transferable skills that can get you there. And once you're at a place where you're ready to start that nursing program, we are committed to giving you that hand-warmed referral to the organization that kicks ass at that, right? So really just asking your members and being able to have that conversation and integrating their responses into their short-term, midterm, and long-term goals, and then wrapping a program around that.
Can I just add one last thing, because you triggered something for me, Michelle? There is no fast track. This is to Mike's point. There's no fast track out of poverty. And we keep thinking that there's a fast track out of poverty. The thing that we need to do to get people out of poverty, again, are those wraparound services to really help people begin to understand what are the things that's keeping you entrenched in this system, right? And some of it may be their own thinking, and some of it may just be their environment. But asking the question is how we help people begin to plot how to remove themselves from circumstances that they no longer wish to be in.
And just to finish it off, I would say that you would be surprised in my work how often people look at me and say, wow, I've never been asked that before. I've never had the space to actually consider what my long-term goals are. I've just been shuffled through program after program after program, being told what it is that I need to do instead of being asked what it is that I want.
I could not agree more. This is, I would say, me personally, the central tenet of the work is for too long, we treat work as something that has to be done, and curiosity, interest, and You know, internal identity has nothing to do with that, which is absolutely mind-blowing. So next up, we have Gaspar Caro, who is the Partnership Director at the Lower East Side Employment Network. Gaspar, you're up.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for this excellent panel and for taking my questions. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to them, but I couldn't help but ask, you know, funders, leadership are always so eager for programs to steer toward apprenticeships, stipended programs. And it's, you know, after 10 years in this field, it's a comment and a point that just is made over and over and over again and just goes nowhere. So, you know, I believe that, you know, without the social safety net that unemployment insurance benefits are currently providing, unpaid training is really untenable. So I kind of feel like this is a temporary opportunity for going into stipended and supported training. But once this moment is passed, I don't know what will happen. So I'm just wondering if the panelists have given this any thought. Have you explored and investigated this? Have you secured stipended training? If so, how did you do that? And if you investigated it and weren't able to secure it, what were the barriers to that? And do you even believe it's possible under the current environment or, you know, a future environment? So I'll leave my questions there, and hopefully they're clear enough for you all to be able to answer them. Thank you.
Yes, the stipend question or dilemma. At Hopbread Kitchen, we do provide a stipend. I think when we think about a stipend, we need to think about, like, what is the purpose of it? Is it meant to secure someone's ability to enter work, or is it meant for them to use that money in a way that is best for them? And often being okay with them not necessarily telling you what they're using that stipend for, and being okay if they're not successful in the program. We were able to fundraise for stipends, and I would say in many cases it's been instrumental to someone's success, and to kind of cultivate and understand that a workforce program, the one that we're running, you should be paid for the work that you're doing, right? You're coming to the kitchen every single day, 8 hours a day, learning these skills. Let's replicate what it feels like to be at work so that you can get used to receiving some form of payment. We don't ask our members what they're using the money for. It is money for which they can do whatever they want. You want to take your family out to dinner? Great. You want to put your money in savings? Great. Often I think the stipend is clumped with like a specific need, when really it should be ultimate. The ultimate decision should be for your members for how to use that money, and honoring, again, their voice and choice, and even honoring and respecting their voice and choice when it isn't in agreement with the expectations that you had programmatically for that stipend. But it does a lot. It builds confidence, it builds value for themselves, and I would argue for a stipend.
Stipends, always tricky, but very necessary. So last up, we have Lisa Fudderman, who is the New York City Regional Director at the Workforce Development Institute. Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for such an interesting panel. Chris, we've met, and we've supported, Chris Bloodworth, we've met. Chris Collins, I'd love to meet you. And Michelle, WDI has supported Hopbread Kitchen in some of your stipends and training. So kind of building upon that, I guess I was interested in regard to Solar One. Are you, because I guess, you know, union apprenticeships are sort of the ultimate paid training. And I'm just wondering, because a lot of the field, you know, the field that you're training in, a lot of those good paying jobs ultimately are union jobs. I'm wondering what your relationship is with the unions, or if you said that you're not doing the placement, you're working with workforce organizations. Are some of those the pre-apprenticeship programs that are connecting people to union apprenticeships? Just am sort of interested in how that works.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. We don't have a lot of ongoing work with the unions, and I think we're doing a little bit of work more recently with the non-traditional employment for women in terms of doing training for them, but we have sort of steered clear of that. And oddly, in the solar space, it's not really a unionized position at this point. So you have both construction and electrical components to it. So on the solar side of things, we're not, there's no union there to put people in. And the unions haven't formed around it. And most of the training that we offer is also offered by 32BJ. It does a lot of that kind of energy efficiency work and that kind of training. And I think there's a more recent training that's being offered by 32BJ and AEA and Enviro. I've forgotten what their name is, but there's another group that's going to be doing some solar training for some of the union members. So we tend to just provide the training for our partners. And if we can get them into apprenticeships, it's great, but it's not something we're really pushing for. All right. Not that we wouldn't want it, but we just don't have the resources to do that.
Well, this has been an excellent and fascinating panel and a really great conclusion to the series where we've talked about policy and advocacy, racial justice, social justice, as well as the role of philanthropy. So I would like to thank our panelists today, Chris, Christopher, and Michelle. Thank you so much for sharing your diverse expertise and perspective with our members and partners today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us, and we look forward to working with you to advocate for our shared vision and priorities. And for the